New Ownership by Chibi Spectra 099. Some would describe me as a sick, twisted man with no perception of how the world works. I would like to prefer to be called a perfectionist. I want things exactly the way I wanted. No, exactly the way they should be, especially with relationships. I lived in a not-so-well-known part of Sinnoh region. My mansion was not far away from Hearthome City. I remember the good old days. My house used to be open to the public until I had moved recently. People would show up every so often and play in my garden, or battle their Pokémon with my maids. I had so many because I hoped that one of them would be the one to spend the rest of my life with. Many of them were fond of me, but it was simply because of my money or my skill at battling. I hadn't fought anyone in years since I retired. I didn't have any hopes or dreams, as they were accomplished when I was but a child. However, I was still lonely. As I could plainly see, every day, my house was much too big for just myself, my Pokémon, and my maids who shared a fake love with me. I wanted someone who actually loved me, and wasn't fake like everyone I knew. I wanted a girl with specific characteristics that would benefit me. Intelligence, beauty, that sort of thing. However, what I wanted most of all was for someone to care for me. A kind-hearted soul who would never abandon me when I needed her most. I had waited for over 3 years for someone decent to manifest herself at my doorstep, but none showed up. As the years went by, I grew bitter. I fired all my maids and released all the Pokémon before I closed my garden to the public. For what seemed like an eternity, I remained in my dwellings alone and unloved. My life would soon turn into an endless cycle of resentment. That was until I met her. I was up at 3 in the morning watching television in my bedroom when I heard a knock at my door. The knock was rushed and repetitive, as if whoever was at the door seemed to need my immediate assistance. At first I ignored it, but as I tried to block it out with increasing the volume, the knocks sounded more like crashes than knocks. I turned the volume down and listened. There were faint whimpers attached to each knock. The knock slowed down, but was louder. I quickly put on my robe and slipped out of my room. Then I stopped. Who in the right mind would knock at my door at this hour? As soon as I answered the door, I was quickly dumbfounded. It was a young woman about my age. She looked terrified. I noticed an oddly large gash on her right leg. It looked worn out and fairly old. I broke the silence after what seemed like the longest stare down of my life. "Excuse me, can I help you?" The woman finally spoke. Her voice sounded like she had been crying for quite a long time, but I wasn't exactly sure. "Please, I need a place to stay." I was confused. Why would she suddenly ask something of me right as we meet? She wasn't exactly doing a good job of selling herself. Without warning, she got louder and her face distorted itself. I felt slightly bad for her. The look in her eyes made her seem lost in some way, and I couldn't just leave her here for the streets to finish her. After finally making my decision, I responded with a slow nod. The girl fell to her knees and gave me a tight hug. All I could do was simply raise my eyebrow in astonishment and think, just what the hell have I got myself into? She returned to her feet and shambled into my apartment. "My name's Alice," she said abruptly. I turned around and responded. "Alice, that's a pretty name. It suits you well, my dear." As she unpacked, I saw her take out a few things. Nothing too important. Just some stale bread, spare clothes, an old hairbrush, and an old small black doll. It had red button eyes, a spiky yellow tail, and a zipper mouth. But what really stumped me was how tattered and torn it looked. Why would she still have that? "Is that yours?" The woman turned around with a smile on her face. "It belonged to me when I was a little girl. I take it wherever I go. Do you like it?" Nearly every part of the doll was in some way damaged. I was surprised by how much a doll meant to her. When I was young, I didn't need dolls for entertainment. Then it hit me. She was the creepy type, or maybe she was depressed. Nevertheless, I was fine with damaged goods. I simply decided if she was the last one to show up on my doorstep, and I kicked her to the curb, I would never forgive myself, so I quietly nodded. "Thanks, that means a lot to me." I hoped to God it would be the last thing she asked of me, but of course, with all women, it just wouldn't be that easy. As I walked her to her room, she opened the door to my balcony. She stared and stared for what seemed like forever. "Good night." No response. The next morning, I walked into her room. The girl was still in the same spot as I left her. "I'm going to go get us drinks. Is that alright?" She didn't respond. "I'll just leave you to it." When I trotted downstairs, I found my friend, Gardevoir. I may have released all of my Pokémon, but she had to stay. She was there when I was a child, and she was there now. Even at this point, she was all this lonely heart had for company. She reached out for something. It was a dish with 2 cups of tea, one for me and one for her. Gardevoir, thank you for the tea, but I'm afraid we have another guest. Would you mind making one more? Her eyes widened in shock. As quickly as she could, she floated frantically to the kitchen. I guess she didn't see her come in even with all that racket. As if she hadn't left, she teleported into the room with more tea. Why she didn't do that the first time was beyond me. Thank you, Gardevoir. Would you like to join us? Like a child to a parent, she tugged on my hand and quietly nodded. Alright, but please behave. You have a beautiful house. I turned and saw her looking down at me from upstairs. Her face was smiling, and that doll was still in her embrace. I didn't want to ruin my chances, so I didn't ask. I'm glad you found it interesting. Would you like a cup of tea? As I held out the glass, she ran down the stairs and slipped. Like a rag doll, she tumbled down the flight of stairs. I ordered Gardevoir to help her, but she was already on it. Using her psychic powers, she set the unconscious Alice on the ground. Unbelievably, she was still holding the doll. Her hands had a tight grip on the pitiful plush the whole time. Only seconds later, she woke up. So, are we gonna have tea? My eyes nearly popped out of my head. She woke up as if nothing happened. Gardevoir, please check to see if our guest is alright. Heal plus. Gardevoir's hands glowed a soft pink with energy as she attempted to heal her. Then she stopped. Gardevoir? Soon, her hands glowed a murky black. She was preparing a shadow ball. Alice stepped back, feeling slightly uneasy, but otherwise not frightened. Gardevoir, cease this nonsense! What are you doing? Ignoring me, she fired. As she released, I closed my eyes in fear that my one chance at happiness was going to meet a foul end. Then I heard a scream, not from Alice, but from Gardevoir. As I scanned her for injuries, I found her hands were burning. Hang on, I'll get a rostberry from the garden. I ran. It was a long time since I had an injury in the house. It was also a long time since I entered the garden since shutting it down, but it was the first time Gardevoir ignored orders. What was up with her? Was she that thick to the point of not knowing the difference between a threat and a young girl? I picked several rostberries and placed them in a basket. When I decided I had enough, I turned and left. What I saw then made my heart stop. Shuppet. What was it doing here? Shuppet didn't nearly appear in the Sinnoh region. Or did they? I didn't have time to find out. Making haste, I took a berry and left. Entering the sitting room, I saw Alice sprawled on the couch while Gardevoir was looking out the window. So you know too? The Shuppet? Do you know where they came from? Gardevoir shook her head. I gave her the berry and she wolfed it down. I chuckled as I remembered the days we traveled together. Every time she saw a berry, she devoured it, sweet or bitter. Are you okay? Gardevoir nodded slowly. What happened back there? She sighed as she stared at me. This was the most serious look Gardevoir had given me in a while. Maybe she figured out something was wrong. I suddenly realized that I forgot about Alice. You were unharmed, yes? Gardevoir is sorry that she caused you any discomfort. Gardevoir scowled, then left the room. Alice then clutched my coat and whispered in my ear, Will you protect me from her? Of course, my dear, I will protect you from anything. The girl kissed me and then whispered, Thank you, you may be the one after all. It was then that I felt complete. I didn't know what she meant by the one, but I felt like I was going to have a beautiful life with this girl, who showed up on a silver platter. I showed her to the bathroom and let her shower. After all, she looked like she hadn't bathed in weeks. While she showered, I waited on the couch. I didn't think I was doing so well as a good host. Damn it, I forgot to bring her a towel. I knocked on the door to the bathroom, but heard nothing. I opened the door and through the glass shower door, I saw her. She was still holding the doll. Alice, that doll's going to get wet if you hold it in the shower. I'll hold it. She screamed as I walked away. All of a sudden, she blacked out. I turned the shower off and ran to her. She wasn't breathing. Gardevoir, help me! This girl isn't breathing! No answer. I tried to wake her up by using CPR, but it didn't work. I placed the doll on her and ran to get Gardevoir. Where are you going? I turned and saw her, completely fine. It was strange that the doll woke her up, but instead of wondering, I just kept that in mind for our future together. She took the towel and I left the room. That night, it was to be the last night we slept apart. Tomorrow I would ask her to move in with me. As I slept, I felt a presence. I was then awakened by Gardevoir. Gardevoir, what is it now? You've been acting strange ever since that girl arrived. Gardevoir held in her hand 2 items, a strange glowing orb and a used TM. It read the label, Dream Eater. Gardevoir held the orb close to her face and nibbled it. Then she held it out to me. You want me to take a bite out of this dream? The Pokemon nodded. I knew this was Alice's dream. It had to be. I couldn't bring myself to do it. But then again, she was asleep. I took a large bite out of the dream and closed my eyes. I was in an old house that was filled with a family. I then heard a voice. Alice, it's your birthday. Have a cookie, dance with somebody. It's your day. I saw Alice. She was wearing a green dress, but she didn't have high heels to match. She was barefoot. What I really noticed was her skin. It wasn't pale, no gashes to be seen. I then concluded this dream was from the past. Alice! I yelled her name, but obviously she couldn't hear me. Alice spoke to whom I assumed to be her mother. Mother, I understand you are trying to make this birthday as fruitful as possible, but all I want is someone to love. I want someone who shares the same feelings as me. A smile formed on my face. Deep down, this girl shared the same ambitions as me. I listened further to see what else she wanted in a man for research purposes. After all, it would help in the long run. Alice, you know that your father and I love you very much, but that doesn't mean we can just let you go all out and fall in love with men who want to take advantage of you. If we let you go, you would be gullible enough to get trapped in an abusive Before she finished her sentence, Alice stormed off. I pursued her into her room. As soon as she entered, she locked the door and burst into tears. I hate you, Mother! I understood now. Because she didn't feel freedom, she had been wandering endlessly, searching for the one she loved. As I turned to see if she was better, I saw a familiar sight out the window. It was a Shuppet. Not just 1, but 2. No, 3. I stopped counting when I realized that there was a gang of Shuppets floating towards the house. Immediately after the Shuppet arrived, I heard a knock, paired with an anxious voice. Alice, dear, please, let me in! The bawling girl wept her tears and stood up. No, Mother, I'm not going to let you plan my life any further. When you learn to accept this, maybe I'll come out. As the two bickered, I looked out the window. I couldn't see anything but smoke. There was a fire. Quick as a wink, I investigated. I tried to look around, but this room, from what I had seen, couldn't have been the source. I wasn't able to find anything until I looked out the window again. My field of vision was blocked by smoke, until for a moment a faint blue light emanated from the window. Then, the unthinkable happened. A shadow ball broke through the window, letting a large amount of smoke inside. It struck the cabinets and shelves, setting books ablaze. Alice screamed. Alright, I'm coming out. As soon as she struggled to her feet, an unknown energy socked her in the gut, knocking her to the floor. Sucker punch. Alice coughed and sputtered as she struggled to call out her mother's name, but as far as I knew, she had already given up on her. The fire had spread, knocking more and more to the ground. At last, the house collapsed. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left but debris. I tried to find her, and unfortunately, I succeeded. She was alive, but her injuries were fatal. She had bricks all over her chest, and she seemed to be bleeding out. Right beside her, I could see a charred doll on top of a stack of bricks, staring back at her, lifeless. As the Shuppets descended upon her, I heard a faint echo filling the room. Marion, you were spared, thank goodness. At least you stood by me to the end. From when I was a child, you were my best friend. You were there even now to show me that even in my dying breaths, I still wasn't alone. And then, it all made sense. Why her skin was so inhumanly pale, why her voice sounded like she had been crying, why she fell down the stairs without breaking a bone. That was why Gardevoir used Shadow Ball. She could see inside her wounds when she used Heal Plus, but her wounds were too severe to even merit her being alive. But that didn't explain one thing. How did she walk amongst the living? But even so, I was alone. If my parents had given me the freedom to leave my house, if I was only able to Before she could finish, her lungs did first. Her struggles to breathe were too much for me to handle. I tried to close my ears, but the sound continued its haunting echo. After what seemed like forever, she stopped. I sighed. I didn't know she had gone through that much. I was her only hope of love, and I had just wanted her for my own personal gain. As much as I said I wanted someone to love, I wasn't into people that already, well, died. The sky slowly turned a shade of gray. It was as if the environment was like one of those old movies I used to see. 3 more Shuppets darted towards the girl, and along with the others, they surrounded her. I watched as 12 Shuppets danced around her frantically. All of a sudden, 12 pins manifested themselves above the dancing ghosts. They then impaled themselves with the small pins. I knew this move. Curse. A ghost-type move that sacrifices life force for a forbidden curse. When they stopped dancing, a dark power surged out of them and into the deceased girl. A glowing wisp seemed to be pulled out of the girl. The Shuppet worked together and brought the charred doll to the wisp. As the doll was brought to the wisp, it was assimilated into the doll as I saw it fall to the ground. Then, from out of nowhere, the doll woke up. The Shuppet laughed in joy and simply left. When I felt it was safe, I crept closer. The doll stepped forward and then pushed onto the carcass. After a failed attempt at whatever it was doing, it sat on it and began to cry. Then the doll fell lifeless once again. What I saw next disturbed me. The carcass started to shake. Bones crackled and snapped as the corpse slowly got up. It took the doll and walked into the forest with a forlorn look on her face. I finally understood. After death caused by the Shuppet, her soul was dragged into the doll. After finding her body, her soul drifted into it. She lived, but still truly a corpse. The dream faded. When my vision was clear of the dream, Gardevoir was at my side. I'm sorry I doubted you, Gardevoir. I understand what I have to do. I will ask her to leave when I wake up. No. I heard a faint whisper. Turning around, I saw her. Gardevoir jumped in front of me and shielded me with a fighting stance. Then she spoke while clutching the doll as if strangling it. You said you would protect me. Now what are you doing? I moved in front of Gardevoir. I'm sorry. I'm afraid I have to ask you to leave. You are no longer welcome here. The girl's face shriveled in rage. No! No, 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 no! The girl fell silent and grabbed a broom from my closet. She broke it in two and impaled herself clean in the neck. Gardevoir fell to the floor. Gardevoir! What she did reminded me of something. In the dream, the Shuppet impaled themselves to use a curse. Alice used curse on a much larger scale. I knelt beside her and pleaded. Gardevoir, please, don't leave me. You're the only one I have. Please, my dearest friend. Tears leaked from my face as I cried over her. Then, it seemed Gardevoir wasn't gone. She struggled to her feet and tried to use Psychic, but she fell to the floor once again. The crazed girl inched closer and closer to her as I knelt down in dismay. She fired a shadow ball at me. I was shoved to the wall and was starting to lose consciousness. Helpless, I watched as she stared down at Gardevoir. Tenacious bitch. We would have been together if it weren't for you. Now you're in for it. She raised her foot and stomped on her chest as hard as she could. Gardevoir gasped as the air left her body. She kept stomping repeatedly, and there was nothing I could do. Then she stopped and turned to me. Now what should I do with you? She stepped closer to me. Shuppet burst from the windows and danced around her. The girl stepped closer and closer to me. Whatever she could have done to me, I just wanted it to be quick. She stopped and dropped the doll. Her body fell to the floor as the doll took control, but it wasn't a doll anymore. It was a Pokémon, a Banette. I knew there was something familiar about that doll. It jumped on my chest and unzipped its mouth. Unknown energy poured out of it as it stood there, watching me. Banette put its mouth to mine, and I felt something being pulled out of me. The last thing I saw before I blacked was the Shuppets, laughing as I fell unconscious. When I awakened, I couldn't see much. The only thing lighting my vision was impaling my arms and legs. Zippers. I tried to move, but a feeling of immense pain surged through my body no matter how much I moved. I turned and I saw two holes. I looked in them and saw what looked to be my room. I saw my lamp, my bed, and Gardevoir. I tried to escape in pure rage, but only worsened my pain. I then heard a voice. You weren't the one after all. Well, at least we'll always be together. I bet, with a little time, you'll love me again. I shivered at the thought as she exited my mansion. After a few days, I accepted my position and acknowledged my new home. How long has it been? Months? Years? I don't know. It's not so bad here. After a while, I got used to this place. I have someone to talk to, and I get to visit my mansion from time to time. The last time I visited, I found out the mansion was under new ownership. The garden was reopened, and the maids battled the trainers that showed up. It was just like the old days. Then she spoke. I don't like this place anymore. We shouldn't come here again. I didn't have a choice. As we were leaving, I caught a glimpse of the sign engraved at the gate. Mr. Bachelet's Trophy Garden. That was new ownership. Final thoughts? Not a creepypasta. This was just a fanfic where two really unlikable characters incredibly awkwardly fall in love, then the protagonist finds out it's really a Pokémon and gets stuck in a generic limbo state. The majority of this story was dedicated to a douchey rich guy who wants a wife, followed by a really contrived Dream Eater sequence. It's a fanfic on a creepypasta show. I don't really have anything else to say. That's it for this creepypasta. Tune in again next Saturday when we tackle yet another story made and sent by the fans with Goodbye Valvagia. If you want to write your own story, help peer edit a story, or even just read the stories early, check out the description where you'll find a link to the creepypasta section of my forum. You'll also find the link to the playlist of every creepypasta reading I've done. If you're interested in keeping up with me on my blog posts, join my Facebook fan page linked below, and if you want to support me in what I do, check out my Patreon page in the description. Remember that if you want your story to be read on the show, you must stay active on your post on the forum, as well as read the forum rules. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, sweet dreams.